It's a matter of nervous system function not being a head case. If it's firing on all cylinders, then your body is fulfilling even its highest duties, with immune system and fertility and birth. Whereas if your nervous system is struggling and it's in overdrive and overwhelm, then some of those things fall to the side for survival.
Yep.
And so it's like getting into nervous system alignment and then taking care of those thoughts because they are so powerful. Like our belief systems shape what happens. And when we can embrace that as mothers, then we protect our belief systems, not only about our pregnancies and births, but about our children and their futures.
Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share home birth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year, from the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall, of Rooted in Eden Private Membership Association,
and me, holistic birthkeeper and photographer Brooke Collier of Sister Birth. Together, we are co-founders and facilitators of Hearth Mother Journey, where we are raising up the next generation of holy wild birthkeepers.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all of your decisions unto the Lord and reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has called good.
Please remember that birth is not a medical event, but a natural process, and we are not your care providers, so this should not be taken as medical advice. As we dive into today's birth story, just a reminder that the choices and beliefs of the mamas sharing their stories here are as individual and varied as the storyteller herself, and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or recommended actions of Lauren and or Brooke.
Hello, Holy Wild Birth listeners. This is Brooke here today in the studio, and I have a guest with me. So I'm really excited for this particular episode. We have some beautiful stories from a really beautiful woman that I've had the privilege of getting to know a little bit over the years. And so I'm here with Leah Wilson. Hi, Leah.
Hi, Brooke. It's always so fun to sit down with you. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Will you tell our listeners a little bit about you and your family and your work in the world?
Goodness. Sure. So I'm Leah Wilson. I am an attorney turned full-time advocate and mother and wife and business owner. So I guess while I'm on this podcast is because of motherhood, which is definitely my primary occupation. So I have 3 children, very far apart in age because I went into my last birth story after a decade of a fertility journey, and for secondary infertility, 4 losses. And so my kiddos are super far apart in age and they remind me of that. They're like, where's my playmate? And I'm like, you know what? God writes really good stories. So we're just not going to question it. So
Amen.
My Isaiah is 8th grade. Samuel is 3rd grade and MJ is 3. And we have a natural health center that we serve our community through. And then we also empower moms across the U.S. to use their voice for health freedom through our organization Stand for Health Freedom. And we've published 2 books in the last year. So one of them is The Vaccine Decision. Every Shot Has a Story, because we had moms approaching us consistently post-COVID on, well, if the mRNA shot isn't great, what about the normal shots? So we started telling the story of every single individual one and how it got on the schedule, and decided that this information was way better to be consumed in print than on a website. So we ended up writing a book. And then the other book just came out in January, and that was Reclaim Vitality, a guide to exit conventional medicine and live naturally, because we feel like in this moment where we are in 2026, there are masses of people who come to us either through our natural health center or through Stand for Health Freedom that want to completely leave conventional medicine behind. Like the structure has really failed them, but they don't have a clear path forward. Like, what does it look like to have a different framework to make decisions for my health and the health of my family? We felt that this was a time to provide that guide. And so that was
Wow.
an exciting time to enter that into this space of people being more health curious than they have been in a few generations.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love the way you framed that. I'm slowly working my way through that book. And I love what you just said there, how it's easy to say, I'm against something. I want to leave something. I want to be done with something. And not always so easy to know, well, then how do I fill that hole that's left by that rejection of that other thing? So to have a book focused on here's a guide work of a how to do that and what do you fill that space with? That's so beautiful and so needed. Um, Beautiful.
And it's really principle based
Hmm.
because one of the things we're walking through as a society right now is reclaiming the authority that's ours as parents and not simply outsourcing to an expert. And so if we're going to be the ones utilizing the resources and experts we have access to, but ultimately making the decision, then what is our framework for that decision? What matters? What are we looking for? What do we measure each decision against? And
Mm.
we don't want people to be stuck in the wilderness, so to speak, of just being frustrated. And health is dynamic as it is. And we can reduce unnecessary suffering by knowing what it looks like to pursue healing with every health decision.
So good. That's so helpful. So we will be sure to put the book in the show notes. I think our listeners will really resonate with this because this is a birth podcast. As you and I were talking about before we hit record, sometimes birth is the gateway into a real awakening about some of the things that you're talking about in this book. Like, I am having a paradigm shift about what it means to be healthy and to pursue well-being in the world and what it does not look like. So our listeners will definitely resonate with the content of Reclaim Vitality. But let's shift our gears a little bit to the birth stories. I think we agreed we were going to focus on MJ's birth. But where does that start? Because I think it starts a little bit before the actual birth. There's some background there. Where would you like to start?
Yes. MJ's story, it feels like a season of bringing MJ into the world, honestly. I told a friend standing in Orlando at a shareholders meeting, she asked, she's like, are you done having kids? And I said, no, at that time, I think Isaiah and Samuel were 10 and 5, I think. And I said, we're climbing mountains with the boys, skiing the Rockies, doing ultra endurance events. But I have a feeling somehow, some way, eventually there'll be a little girl in our life. And I just sort of said it and just never mentioned it again. I just kind of had this feeling that there's a little girl and I thought she's probably out there in the world right now and she's 7 years old and she'll join our family or something because we had been foster parents and adoption is a huge part of my heart.
Yeah.
And just kind of kept living and was running a race in November of 2022. And it was a 26-mile race, it was a marathon. And I had to stop and go pee 9 times. And I finished the race just like trudging through. And I looked at Nick, my husband, who's a doctor, and I said, something is really wrong with me. And we have to get to the bottom of it. And he was like, okay, we'll go home. We'll do new blood work. Like, we'll get to the bottom of this. And went home. And a month later, found out I was like 9 weeks pregnant already.
My.
And it was quite the surprise. I mean, we weren't planning on having more children, even though I'm always open to it. As someone who has experienced secondary infertility and multiple losses, like I would never close the door to that potential of new life. And so, but finding out that we were pregnant and had no clue how family planning had failed us, I went into this like deep season of surrender. And at 17 weeks after I had accepted that this little girl was coming into our lives and was going to rock our worlds, found out that we lost her. And I felt robbed for the first time. I had always kind of conceptualized my miscarriages as innate on the job, that this child wouldn't have been viable. It was the merciful thing.
Yeah.
It's, like I had always felt that there was something innate about losing a child in first trimester, even though it's such an invisible journey and it's not easy. But I was able to reconcile it in my spirit. And this time I wasn't. Like
Yeah.
the second trimester loss felt harder than losing family members that I've lost. I've lost immediate family members, and just crazy the way it stayed with me for a while. And Ruth stayed with me for a while too, which wasn't my first time. I had had miscarriages that took 10, 12 weeks to complete, which is just a crazy experience. And, people think, why the heck didn't you get a DNC? You're going to die. I've had obstetricians look at me and say, you need a DNC today or else you will die. I mean, you think that practitioners don't actually say these things until you're on the receiving end.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I just politely say, like I do in most mainstream medical encounters, I'm going to go home and think about it. Thank you. I don't say no. You're on their turf. You're not going to convince them to think like you do. So I just say, I'm going to go home and think about it. And
It's a
that
great
woman,
pro tip right there.
yes, don't fight with them. Don't convince them. So losing Ruth at 17 weeks, and one of the things that I did was actually call you, Brooke.
Yeah.
A dear friend of mine connected me with you, and I said, I think at that point in time, I said, we found out we lost her 4 weeks ago and she still hasn't passed. Like, what are your thoughts? And you helped me kind of mentally and spiritually prepare to trust the process of loss for completion and closure and faith. And all those things are vital to a loss journey. I want to give women that permission to trust their bodies and God in loss also, not just in birth. And so I think your friend on the phone with us that night said, she said it took me 5 weeks or something like that to pass one of my losses. And I said,
second trimester loss also.
Yes. And I said, God, no. I said, no, God, I'm not up for that. Like, that cannot be my story. And what do you know? 10 weeks later, I sat down with my midwife here in Indiana and I said, where do we go from here? And she had just pulled blood work for me, and she had been monitoring that my HCG levels were in fact falling, and that there was no elevated white blood cell counts, and that there was no infection, so we were being prudent. And she said, based on your last blood draw and your health history, you have lupus. And I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I looked at my husband, Nick, who's a practitioner, and saw his face and saw how seriously she was taking it. And I said, that doesn't resonate. We are not here for a diagnosis. And I completely divorced it. It's like, no, this is not my story. And Nick said, let's do what we know to do. We're going to go to the sand and heal. So we went to Naples, Florida, which is kind of one of our fun, safe places as a family, and just put our feet in the sand for a week. And at the end of that trip, right after I had gotten rid of all of the preparations to pass a second trimester loss, a second trimester baby, I had taken the jar out of my backpack and the saline solution out of my backpack that I had carried around for literally 10 weeks because the midwife said, you will never see evidence of this baby. Your body has completely absorbed her. And I was thinking, I understand that concept for like a 5, 6, 7 week loss, but for second trimester, am I a circus freak? You think that I've completely absorbed this baby? And she wasn't right. I think that her signals of lupus were my body doing exactly what it was supposed to, with high autoimmunity to reject content still in my uterus. And while we were down there in Florida, I unexpectedly passed Ruth. And so I got to see evidence of that baby, which was such an amazing gift. But it was such a gift to see evidence of her. And that night I went to bed, and that was April 28th, 2022. And that night I went to bed and woke up April 29th, 2022, after having a dream that I had the jar and I had put the remains of my baby in the jar and she had come back to life. And I got to see her beautiful round blue eyes and her blonde hair barely covering her head. And I was running around telling my friends of what a miracle she was. and how she had come back to life like a modern miracle. I mean, this is like, I was like breathless running around telling everyone about the miracle that she was. And that I thought that would be the only day I ever got to spend with my daughter, was that dream. And it
What a
wasn't
cool
until
dream.
it was
Do you
so
feel like the Lord was
crazy.
letting you like see her?
Oh my goodness. And
Like
I
actually
tried,
her, like how she really is, like in
absolutely,
heaven.
maybe that in heaven, but so when I got on the flight home, I tried to draw, and I'm not a drawer because I wanted so badly to be able to like capture the one the one time I got to be with her. And so trying to capture that, and it wasn't until our rainbow baby MJ, who, get this, Brooke, you won't believe this, she was born 1 year later, April 29th,
That's
2023.
incredible.
Literally 365 days later. I'm like, God does wild things. It wasn't until MJ was, I think I looked back in my journal before this, she was 12 weeks old when I saw the baby from my dreams. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's her. Her head and her ears, her eyes, the hair covering of her scalp. It's her. I mean, I don't know the mystery of how I got to be with MJ after passing Ruth. I mean, whatever it is, I don't know how to solve what that means, but
Yeah, you don't have to.
just the gift of the daughter from my dreams being in my arms 1 year later to the date. It was a
That's
grueling
incredible.
but beautiful start to our sweet Miriam Jane.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's a vulnerable story, even years later. And I
Yes.
recognize that. And I I remember those conversations with you, and it's so unusual, like you said, that anyone would dare to remain pregnant that long without going to seek some sort of intervention to make it end. And I want to hit on both like what you said about the trust of the body that you had to have there, and also the emotional journey of having, yeah, just an incompleteness to that process for so long. And what is it like to sit in that for that many weeks? What sustained you? How did you keep doing that?
And I remembered telling God probably 5 weeks, so halfway through the 10-week, waiting for her to pass. I said, this is so hard because my daughter is still with me, but I
Yeah.
have nothing left to offer her. So
Yeah.
I
That's
knew
as a
that,
mother, like that's the worst feeling as a mom.
right? There's literally nothing. Obviously, carrying a baby that long, you think, well, this is all a mistake. She's actually still there. And I think that was part of the mental
Mm,
dance, was you never lose hope that the loss of heartbeat wasn't a fluke. Like man's metrics couldn't capture that the miracle still continues. So I think that was a big piece of it. And I had one of my prayer partners tell me very soon after the loss that MJ was a war casualty because of what I was fighting. And that was hard too. That was a mental dance because it's like, I don't want my daughter to be a casualty of my calling, of the powers of darkness that we endeavor to bring back under the feet of God, that eventually all of this authority will be brought back under the one and only true God. And I never wanted my children to be casualty to that. So that was also very hard, but not trying to solve why she was gone, but understanding it felt unjust.
yeah.
And it was in the whole, I mean, that was 2022. So at the height of COVID mRNA shots being everywhere. And I had some hesitations with some interactions with a therapist I had had. And so that made me doubt. And so, but ultimately, I had to completely surrender all of that to God, that you are merciful, God, in everything that you do. And that it was merciful that Ruth gets to dwell with you. And so I thought, the next mountain I climbed, I wrote on my forearm in Sharpie, I wrote act of worship, because I thought, I don't know what's on the other side of this for my family, but I'm going to climb this mountain knowing that God is merciful and that everything I do has to be an act of worship. And so I tried to just move forward. and embracing the adventure with my boys and seeing our family as complete, because in my head, that's what it was. And then what do you know? I was training for another race November of 2022 and had all the same symptoms of back pain, constant urination, my hips feeling off, my pubic bone feeling off, like my hormones were just giving me all the same signals. And I thought, this can't be this can't be true. And that was the introduction to that couldn't have been November. I'm wrong. That was August of 2022. So she fully passed in April.
Wacky.
And then,
That means you were having these same symptoms almost exactly a year later too, during a run again.
right. It was crazy. So it was,
This time you didn't think something was wrong with you though. You kind of suspected probably.
I was like,
Maybe.
oh, I'm getting ready to embark on a real faith journey. Like, this can't be the same. And that's what it was. I definitely had to say in my mind that this experience is going to be distinct and it's going to be led by God, that his voice is the only voice that matters. There was a clear mandate from God at the beginning of this pregnancy, which was anyone who's involved in the pregnancy or birth has to expect things to go well. That was my one litmus. Like, if you're going to be a doula, part of my birth team, a provider, a parent that's close to the situation, a sister, anyone who wanted to be part of this miracle had to expect things to go well. And I stuck to that to protect that space. I fired every midwife I hired. I fired my doula. I fired my doula the morning that I went into labor.
Really?
So it was definitely a faith journey that.
So did all of these people, these midwives and the doula, just end up kind of showing you in some way, shape, or form that they had niggling doubts or just a lack of confidence? What led you to get that clear about, like, I actually need to remove you from this situation?
Yes. So I had the standard in my head. So the first midwife was that I had decided that I would do no ultrasounds because, with ultrasound, there can be indications that maybe an ultrasound is a good idea, but to do ultrasound as a routine intervention is a lot more cost than benefit, like a lot more. And one of my dear friends said, "You're not doing an ultrasound, right?" And I said, "Well, I am high risk. I've just had 4 losses and I've had a C-section. So I'll probably do the ultrasound to make sure everything's fine with the position of my scar." And he said, "Leah, it's not whether the ultrasound harms, it's how much." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. I'm not going to interfere. I'm not going to interfere because I know that ultrasound does not improve maternal or fetal outcomes. It doesn't. It's a picture and a glimpse into what God knows about your baby. And we really can't do anything about it, no matter what it finds." So I decided to not do ultrasound, and my midwife was not okay with that. And she sat down and tried to convince me that if my child had half a brain, that we wanted to know that now rather than later. And I said, "It seems like you're anticipating everything that could go wrong and not expecting things to go well. So I'm going to leave now." So that was her. And then there were others that had different requirements for the birth that didn't set well with me. And putting those requirements on it, I was like, all right, that's not going to work. There was someone that was dear to me that was also mad that I wasn't getting the ultrasound. So I was like, that's not going to work. So I just really protected with everything in me that man cannot improve this process, cannot improve that women get to co-create with God. So I decided that, that I was going to put more faith in God's care for me and my baby and in God's creation than I was going to put in man's knowledge. And so that really guided me. And I had to make some moves that showed my commitment to that.
So well said. That's beautiful. Yeah. You were like actively feeding your trust and your faith in the process. And part of actively feeding that meant saying no to some things and some people.
Right. And I have to acknowledge that the reason I love your birth course is because I forget what it's called, unassisted Christian birth or something. It's like the mega package, the one that is everything.
Embrace birth journey.
Yeah.
But there's an unassisted course in there too.
Yes, embrace birth journey, because it literally walks you through from soup to nuts, the mother understanding and embracing primal birth. I don't know if you say
Mhm.
primal birth, but that's kind of my
It's a good
language.
interpretation. Yeah.
Which, friends, isn't it amazing to be primal in this modern world? Like, when else do we get to be totally primal except in birth? It's like
Yeah.
men, I think sex is the only primal thing for men, but we get birth. So, like, you know what I mean?
Never thought of it that way, but
It's like,
yes.
it's so amazing. But that birth course also fit into my requirement of expecting
Mm.
things to go well. I mean, you are so intentional with every word that you use. You don't use words like cervical lip or, bad position, or like none of the words that would imply that the process is unfolding exactly how it should. Like, none of your words challenge that. And it was such a gift.
Hmm.
And I had my sister go through the course with me because I knew she was going to be at the birth. And then
Brilliant.
you had one of the most pivotal parts of the course, not just feeling equipped and excited about the process unfolding exactly how it should, but the YouTube channel that you put in there. I don't know if you curated that, the unassisted birth YouTube channel, but
With all the birth videos? Yeah, that's my
right,
curated list.
because none of those YouTube videos would seed doubt either. And it's
Exactly.
not because they're perfect. I mean, what that taught me, I would sit down with my youngest at the time. He was 6. And at night, we would just watch like 10 or 15 birth videos together every night of my 3rd trimester. And none of those videos would seed doubt, but they did show me that there are hundreds of variations of normal,
Hmm.
thousands probably, of variations of normal. But yet every midwife I've had, every practitioner I've had, has watched for everything to happen by the textbook. And so I thought that my birth with Isaiah and Samuel, one ending in emergency C-section after 42 hours of labor, and the other after 5 hours of labor ending in suction cup as the baby's already crowning. So I thought both of those births were failed positioning.
Mm.
And so I had in my head, like, we have to control the position. And after going through all of those YouTube videos of seeing, like, you can have breech twins born in the bathtub at home that are thriving and have APGARs of 10. So I was like, what? We've been lied to. There's so many variations of normal. And that really helped me just in my affirmations put down, birth is unfolding exactly how it's supposed to.
And that's a great one. Yeah. So did you feel pretty good during this pregnancy? Did you end up having a midwife the whole time who did prenatal care with you, or was this something you took on for yourself?
No, I didn't do prenatal care after 20 weeks when they were mad about the ultrasound. I couldn't find another midwife because
Okay.
you know what? Midwives are in high demand. You better
Truth.
snag up your favorite midwife when you find out you're pregnant, because their birth months get full now. It's funny because even lawmakers I work with, they're like, I keep hearing about these women home birthing. I mean, is this a new trend? Well, they don't want to birth in the hospital. No, it's not a new trend. Women have been birthing at home since we were created.
Yep.
But anyway, so people are, the midwives are in high demand. So at 20 weeks, I couldn't find a new midwife. And so what I did instead was I called a mentor in our circle. Her name is Denise, and she's been a midwife for over 30 years in Canada. And I know
Ah.
that she respects creation and birth and stewarding that space well, like we do.
Mm-hmm.
So she was kind of my advisor. Like, I would chat with her, talk about things with her, tell her how I was doing, and she was just my advisor.
That's
She never got to
perfect.
see me in person, but
Right.
she was even my advisor during birth. We called
Great.
her twice, and I wasn't involved in calling her. I don't even know if I knew they called her, but because of your instruction in your class, I stayed primal. I wasn't being asked questions. I wasn't being asked how I felt or if I wanted to move or if I wanted a drink. No, if it looked like I needed a drink, they hand me water. Don't ask the mother questions. Just let them be. And so that was beautiful. But the 2 reasons we called her this midwife advisor during birth, the first one was when I fired the doula. My water broke at 5 a.m. and my best friend happened to be in town. She was sleeping in the basement and knocked on the door like, guess what? You're in town and my water broke. And it was just like such a dream that she got to be there the day that MJ was born. And I said, but come upstairs. Let me show you what the water looks like. And the water was very greenish brown. And so I sent a picture to my doula, and the doula said, please call me right away. And Sarah said, I will call her. And so she called the doula, and the doula said, get to the hospital immediately. And they did not tell me that. Sarah and Nick, my husband, did not tell me that. They talked and they felt like, let's not have her come because she's not expecting things to go well. So that was my litmus test. So they said, Lauren, please don't come. So she did not come to the birth. And they called Denise, my midwife advisor, and Denise said, this is a concern, but it is in no way urgent. Watch baby's movement for normalcy. Watch the color. Does it change? Does it increase? Does it decrease? And watch for labor to progress consistently. She said, just watch these 3 things. And so that was like really arming. And so when I said, is Lauren coming? Nick and Sarah said, no. And I said, okay, we didn't get this far to give up at the first sign of uncertainty. So we're still going to expect things to go well. And so Sarah told me at a later date, like that confidence from me allowed them to support that, allowed them to say,
sure,
we're continuing forward. Like this is unfolding exactly how it should. And I said, and then the other thing I said to Sarah was, if MJ is supposed to be born fast, she will be. And if she's supposed to be born slow, she will be. Like whatever she needs, it will unfold that way. Because I had been a part of friends inviting me into their births where the speed of birth is very important to what's happening with that umbilical cord and with that baby's heart rate and with that baby's position. And we can't calculate it all. We can't manipulate it, you know? And I was adjusted after my water broke. I think like my water broke at 5 a.m. I was adjusted at 8 a.m. by my husband, who's a practitioner. So like you could maybe consider that an intervention, but just getting my hips like optimized and allowing baby to have the space she needs. And
in our Hearth Mother journey program, we teach the way of the Hearth Mother, and we would classify a chiropractic adjustment as live as designed. It's just returning to alignment.
yes,
it's not an intervention.
So
yep.
That's so good. So good. We're actually removing interference when we do the adjustment to realign. So yeah. And then the second reason I called Denise my birth team called Denise was my placenta was not delivered for 2 hours. It was horrible because MJ came pretty fast. You ask, I won't get ahead of myself. I'll just answer your question, which was, did I feel good during the pregnancy? And yes, I have great pregnancies. My births have always presented their own complications, but I love being pregnant and I felt good. You know, I was 38 at the time and never swelled, never slowed down, stayed on my feet the whole time. So it was fun.
Can I ask, when you got to about 17 weeks, what was that like for you? I just ask because I know that when we hit a milestone like that, where there's been a previous loss, there can be some, I don't know, a refreshing of grief or fear. Did that happen for you?
I decided not to calculate my due date or, because I didn't want to get stuck in the anticipation of 17 weeks. So I knew about around where 17 weeks was going to be, and I tried to really protect myself. I was actually traveling quite a bit at that time on a speaking circuit, and just my whatever travel companion I had, making sure they were supportive of what was going on and everything. So I had told my friends, I was like, we're not counting weeks this pregnancy. It's not important.
That's so wise.
We don't need to know the due date. And my sister was convinced the baby was coming 2 months before she was, just because we weren't really counting.
No one really knew.
And I have such a small frame that I get so overly ripe, So it's you could be convinced at 28 weeks it's time to have this baby.
This goes all out in front and big belly. Yeah.
So ripe.
That's awesome. Good. Okay. Well, we kind of started the birth story a little bit. You said your waters broke at 5 a.m. one morning when your best friend Sarah was in town. And then what from there?
Yeah.
Or if I'm skipping anything about the pregnancy that's important, you can still say that too.
No, I don't think so. I had prepared my birth affirmations in advance. I think I put them on the wall at the beginning of April, and she was born April 29th. So I knew, when my girlfriend Sarah was in town, the April 28th, the passing of Ruth was kind of, celebrating that 1 year later, and being ripe with MJ was like such a roller coaster, such a sign of God's goodness. I mean, what on full display. So I spent a lot of time, I think by counsel of your instruction, was I filled my home with flowers because flowers make me happy. So like starting the month of April, when I felt like it was about time, I had fresh flowers everywhere in all of my birth spaces. I had a pink birthing dress picked out and I had affirmations all over my walls so that me and my birth team could be on the same team. And I think it's so funny because there was one affirmation, I can't remember exactly what it said, but whenever I read that one or said it, it was like, ooh, that's too much effort. Like I'm putting too much on myself, And so I do think that what affirmations we choose, because your affirmation is what you are accepting as truth and what you're accessing to replace lies, what you're accessing to replace unproductive thoughts. And so having your affirmations be in alignment with what is true about you and your baby, about God's process, is revolutionary, and so having these posted on my walls so that I could access them and so that my team could access them. And
Did you take that one down? The one that wasn't aligned?
no, it was beside my toilet. And it's funny because I generally like birthing on the toilet,
Mm-hmm.
and I just kind of resented it every time I looked at it. But I never took it down. It's just a clear memory of mine that,
Funny.
but I know that, just really leaning on that there are Holy Spirit midwives, there are angel midwives in the room, is that I didn't find a midwife, but I know there are angel midwives in this room, and that I am safe, held, and loved, and that this is God's process, and be where your feet are, which I think if as women, whether we are pregnant or birthing or not, that if we can understand the power of being where your feet are, that our joy is amplified, that our endurance is amplified. And we need endurance for our mission as mothers. And in birth, I knew that at every single moment, I had everything I needed for that moment. And if my mind went to, can I do this for 5 more hours? Nope. This moment, I have everything I need, or, whatever projection out or back, or it's just being right where your feet are to know that in this very moment, I am safe, held, and loved. So yeah, the preparation was big. And we had also done the miles circuit. I don't know if you're a fan of the miles circuit or not,
I am.
but you better believe it. I have friends and friends who you do the miles circuit a few days before you're about ready to have that baby, and the baby comes.
Or
And
it
so
can
we did.
really reset a labor that's struggling to take off too. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yes. So good. So we did that 2 days leading up to MJ's birth, and even some of those positions after my water broke, just for release and getting pressure off of my belly because my belly was so big. But yeah, so labor progressed as, it was 5 a.m. when the water broke, had some food, got an adjustment, took a bath, blow dried my hair,
And you're not contracting at this point?
consistently contracting.
You did. So you did start contracting when your water broke.
Yes.
I asked
Yes.
that only because some people have their water break and then there's some lag time before they have a contraction. So just clarifying.
Which was the case with my Isaiah. Is my first labor, my water broke, and I blame it on the black cohosh. And I didn't start labor for probably 16 or 17 hours after my water broke. And I never knew that your water replenishes itself. And my water could break 50 times in those 2 days. I mean, or with every contraction, it felt like it was breaking.
You're squeezing more out. Yeah.
But I made a lot of mistakes during that young first birth. I was so excited 17 days post dates when my water broke and my contractions did not start. So I just went on a 2-mile run to try to encourage my body to move. Who would let me do that?
Well, if
How
you're
about
already a runner, then that can work. But
how about you burn some calories when you're about to do a marathon of labor?
you were
So
just so
anyway,
excited.
yes, so excited. Let's go run. So labor did progress consistently and steadily, and I don't measure my contractions, so I don't know if they were rhythmic or how many minutes apart they were after my water broke, but there were contractions and just kind of stood in the kitchen, swayed, ate, and my sister and my friend Chrissy, who works for Stand for Health Freedom, she had been a labor and delivery nurse for 13 years before she came to work for us. And really, it was because of all the intervention that was really hard on her that she decided to leave labor and delivery and come work for the movement. And I called Chrissy one day when I couldn't find a midwife and I said, "Hey, would you be willing to just come sit at my house when I go into labor just in case I need you?" And she was like, "Of course." So she was at the house the whole time I was in labor. She arrived probably around 7 or 8 a.m. And thank God she was, because it was just such a sweet presence. Like, even when there was presence of meconium at the beginning, she was like, "This is a variation of normal. Like, we see meconium all the time with normal births." So, and she also, I ended up losing a ton of blood. And so she was helpful with just cleanup and being diligent about getting me, in positions and low to the ground, and because of the placenta waiting to
Nice. Yeah.
pass. So yeah, birth, it progressed pretty steadily and ended up, I would say, one thing I never had done before in labor was I birthed against the shower wall for labored for probably an hour and a half of active labor, and then ended up on all fours over my makeup stool for the last hour. And then once I felt baby fully descend down, I stood up and she came out in one fell swoop into my own arms as I was standing
Yay.
up. And it was so beautiful because I was listening to Holy Wild Birth while I was doing a long walk the week before I birthed. And one of the things you said on that podcast was it's primal for the mother to be the first mow, which is kiss, the first vocalization, and the first touch. Like, for the mother's offspring, for me to be the first vocalization she hears, the touch she feels, and the kiss that she feels.
Yeah.
And that became a desire of mine. Like,
Mm.
it felt very empowering to have everything we need to nurture our offspring. So when I stood up and I told Nick, I said, "I'm going to catch my own baby. If you're needed, then you can be back up." So I ended up catching her, and it was just like
Oh.
so exciting. And I looked at my watch. I had my running watch on, and I said, "It's 11:03. We all have time to eat lunch together now." And like, I was just so excited. And so I went straight from my bathroom to my bed and, just 5 or 6 steps away. And within minutes, contractions were way more severe than they had been the entire labor.
Mm.
And I just worked through it, let the cord pulse for about 45 minutes. And then I said, "You're going to have to cut the cord. I think it's done pulsing, but you're going to have to cut the cord because I need to get up and give you the baby."
Yeah.
So Sarah cut the cord, took the baby, and I got up to try to work through these insanely intense contractions and got to hour 2, and they called my midwife friend again, and she said, "Well, you do want to get some gravity going, encourage it to come out, but as long as her blood loss isn't too severe, we're not at a point where I think there's any necessary intervention," which, thank God, the doula wasn't there, because she had told me she will allow 30 minutes before advising hospital.
Good grief.
So I was like, all right. So
I don't think I told you this, Leah. I've never birthed a placenta before 2 hours myself, personally.
like, what's the average time?
2 hours. It seems like 2 hours is when my placentas come out.
And is it
Yeah.
painful?
No, actually, I don't have cramps, which is super strange. But this is very much a rabbit trail. I just wanted to let you know. In my own body, I know 2 hours to be within the realm of normal.
Well, and goodness, it seems like I'm slow to pass losses, I carry my babies very long. So why would we expect any different?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was funny too, because another rabbit hole, I had felt at the bottom of my belly for the past month. I was like, what is this body part? This is strange. Like, it feels like it should be a head, only this head is not a head of a baby. Like, it is tiny. And Sarah kept saying, it's her elbow. It's her elbow. It's fine. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not an elbow. And then after baby birth, placenta burst, it was still in there. So it was like a fibroid that I went and got an ultrasound like 6 months later, and the fibroid was like almost shrunk to nothing. But it was fascinating that, so just another
Interesting.
weird kind of thing that self-resolved eventually. But I loved that you are normalizing that the placenta doesn't have to pass in 30 minutes or else you die, because that was the other thing. Everyone says hemorrhaging is the end of life. And by God, I hemorrhaged.
Did you?
And Chrissy, my nurse friend, thinks that I lost almost 2 liters of blood.
No.
And I passed out
Okay.
right before the placenta came. So I stood up to get gravity, hit the floor, and as soon as I passed out, Chrissy pressed on my belly and the placenta flew out and I came back too. So it was almost like I had to like completely release before that placenta was going to be birthed. And I don't know if it was something with second trimester loss immediately
that came to
preceding this.
mind when you were talking about that. Because I feel a lot of times when placentas take time, midwives like to talk about there's sometimes some sort of psychological holding on that just feels like there's some inability to let go of something. Maybe, yeah. So you had to lose consciousness and lose your conscious mind in order to let it go. Maybe.
Right. And I had told Nick, I was like, we are not transferring. Like, I've transferred twice and I don't know if either was necessary, but it was the quote unquote authority and advice of my midwives and their comfort level. It wasn't my comfort level either time, to my recollection. And so at that point I was like, if we can do this, we're going to do it, And so he actually did. When I passed out, I came back to in shock. And so he called EMS. And after the placenta came out, I was like, I'm alive again. And so he said, never mind, don't come. And EMS said, sir, are you sure? And he said, yeah, it looks like she's fine. Don't come. And they were like, sir, that's not how this works. And he was like, no, really, do not show up here.
Yep.
So I ended up bouncing back and being able to rebuild my blood volume over the next several weeks naturally with just a lot of juices and salt water.
When the placenta came out, then did your bleeding stop? Or did some measures have to be taken to make the bleeding slow?
Bleeding stopped. And I think that, I don't know. I have read things since then about putting, I guess the placenta wasn't out, I couldn't have done anything, but putting a piece of the placenta in your cheek afterward. And I'm not a placenta eater. Like, I've never done placenta encapsulation or anything like that. But after this amount of blood loss and wanting to recover naturally at home, Nick did make a placenta smoothie. So he just like diced it up, put it in the blender, and I drank it immediately.
Smart. Yep.
So, frozen berries and placenta smoothie to help me recover after the placenta came out. And I had a very significant amount of blood loss. I admit it could seem reckless to some people, but I was fine. I couldn't leave my bed for 3 days. Like, I couldn't stand, which was, part of the recovery, I guess. God teaching me to go very slow.
Yeah. Yeah. So even there, your stance was, I'm going to trust that my body knows how to resolve this and how to recover and replenish blood volume and all of that.
Yes. And Nick offered. He said, we can go get IV therapy. We can help with rehydration, blood volume. And I said, I know, I just really don't think I want to be poked and prodded. I just want to let this happen. And I did have headaches for a few weeks. So who knows? I could have made a different choice, but I chose just to zero intervention. I had a midwife come over that night late to help with some stitching. And she saw MJ's eye had a big knot in it. That was like a blood-filled knot right by her tear duct that was taking up some space on her nose and eye. And she said, you need to go immediately because you don't want her vision to ever be affected. So immediately you need to go get help. And we just prayed, and I felt like God said, this too will self-resolve. And, we woke up 10 days later, and there was no evidence of anything by her eye. So
Awesome.
we had just nursed her, expected things to go well, prayed over her, hot compresses here and there when it was a little weepy.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful to see that
Amazing.
self-resolve too, which is
Yeah.
really what I want moms to know about the whole ultrasound dance is much of what you find in utero self-resolves.
Hmm.
And at that point, you've had all this nervous system intervention, that the nervous system is the foundation of growth and development and healing. And to intervene in the nervous system to take a peek and then not, you know what I mean? It's just like things are going to self resolve faster and more wholly if we don't intervene. And I just think giving yourself that permission. And I won't lie, I was tortured. I mean, the enemy really tortured me when it came to the end of my pregnancy. I would have dreams of MJ missing parts of her face, her having cleft palate. Like I would just have these dreams. And I thought, I just need to see her face. I haven't seen it yet, you know?
Yeah.
And when she came out with, just full radiant beauty, it's like, forgive me, Lord, for any doubt I allowed to creep in.
But you're human.
Yes.
And like you said, there's an enemy that would have you enter into fear like that. And he was going at you. Yeah.
Just such an opportunity that women get to operationalize our faith. It's an unmatched opportunity and it's an offer from God to each of us. And it's so exciting. So exciting.
I love that phrase. You've used it a couple times, or maybe it was before we recorded, but operationalized faith. That's so good.
What better time than birth, right?
Hmm. Truly, truly, truly. So your birth story was told a little not sequentially. So are there any other bits or pieces of it that you still wanted to mention?
When
Or did
MJ
you get
was
it all?
born into my arms, she cried right away. So that was beautiful and definitely gave us evidence of the meconium with the color on her
Uh-huh.
and with the gurgly cry, but immediately cleared it and probably cried for the first 2 hours of her life. And I think that it was most likely her just
Mhm.
clearing everything. But yeah, it was such a beautiful, beautiful moment and the sweetest thing to hear her enter the world with strong lungs.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So it was,
Um,
I don't know if I missed any tidbits, but I just think that the whole process of from conceiving Ruth to birthing MJ just taught me so much about what it looks like to be slow and nurturing and surrendered. And I've always thought that maybe motherhood is a young woman's sport. We should all have our babies super young because it takes so much energy and fortitude but having a baby, 12 years after my first was such an image of what it means to fully embrace the nurture aspect of motherhood and to nurture ourselves. Because when you have a faith journey after loss, when you're pregnant, you realize that outside of man's intervention, the only thing that I can do for this baby is to take care of myself. And if I take care of myself, she benefits. And I think that that's not supposed to stop after 9 months. I think that we have to recognize that as a woman, caring for ourselves only benefits the people around us. And I'm not talking about, 2-hour morning routines or spa days.
security.
I'm talking about valuing our spiritual, mental, and physical wellness and that our children benefit from that. They learn from it and they catch it. You know what I mean? They catch that value for stewarding our physical, spiritual, mental wellness. And they also benefit from having a happy, joyful mother that they too can be happy and joyful instead of grumpy. So it was just a beautiful later in life pregnancy and birth to see nurture on full display.
That's good. Wow. I'm really happy to have been able to hear MJ's story in full.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for sharing it
of
in
course.
such a beautiful way that you said the Lord writes good stories. And here's an example of that. Even the way he weaved together Ruth and MJ's stories in some
Yes.
meaningful ways too.
Yes. Such a image of goodness and the goodness all around us. And I just remember a few weeks before MJ entered this world, all my girlfriends from, I think it was 11 states, converged here and we had a belly henna party. And they got
Incredible.
the henna on their hands to remember to pray. And I had the henna on my belly and they prayed over me. And it was it was such a beautiful celebration of life. You know what I mean? I have to admit, I'm always like, I don't do baby sprinkles. Those are bougie and unnecessary. But these women were like, we are not skipping celebrating this. Like, we will take every reason to celebrate this miracle. And I think we have a lot to learn from that is that there is an abundance of gratitude and celebration that comes with every single conception, giving the outcome to God and thanking Him for every miracle that we get to cherish earthside.
I love that. Good friends there who see
Yeah.
and prioritize that.
So good.
So
Yes.
good.
Yes. I remember one other thing I'll share. Um, I mentioned that, fighting through things, and you said, what about the 17 weeks? And one of the things was, I want to be able to picture MJ's birth. Like, God, give me an image of this birth. And I was standing cooking with one of my girlfriends in Idaho around, gosh, I don't know, maybe halfway through my pregnancy. And I said, something scares me, and that's I cannot picture her birth. Does that mean that her birth won't happen if I can't picture it? And she said, no, Leah, it's your job to build it, to create the vision so that you can believe it. And it really changed something in me of, if we want to be able to picture what's coming to fruition, then we can create that image. We can put the vision to it, put the picture to it, and then be able to embrace and walk forward in what we're co-creating. And so that was huge for me. Yeah, the image of her birth I didn't just dream it or didn't just drop into my lap, but one of my friends gave me permission to create that picture and walk toward that picture. And
Mm,
I hope that's helpful to some moms who are trying to approach a second, third, fourth birth that may have followed some trauma, to be able to create that image and believe that God has something good on the other side of this.
that's really helpful. So I'm curious, the image you created after being given that permission, did it kind of match with the moment of MJ's birth? Or did MJ's birth match it?
Yeah, I think, what I had come up with was a morning birth instead of night, and that did happen. And my bathroom is like my safe place, And so my bathroom, that's where she was born and the people that were there. And I think the only unique factor was that Sarah got to be there because she was in town.
Oh, yeah. Happy surprise.
Yes. And the whole catching her myself was something that came to me very, very late in pregnancy because of listening to Holy Wild Birth. So
Woot woot.
that was also unique, but
Yeah.
beautiful.
I love that you did that. I love it so much.
Yes,
Yeah. You have that seared in your memory forever.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's definitely seared in my memory. And it's funny because a few of my friends have told the boys, your mom caught your sister, and the boys were there. I wanted them to be a part and to see birth normalized. I think it's a good service to their future wives.
Yep.
But they have no clue that it's special to catch your own baby. And so some people have told them, it's so neat that she did this. She's so strong. And I'm like, you guys, it just happens. And they're like, no, women don't do that. And I'm like, but they can if they want to.
And to your boys now, that's just normal. Of course, the
Yes.
mom catches the baby.
Yes.
So they're not super impressed with you, but in some ways they shouldn't be, I guess, because it should be something that we don't think is weird that
Yes.
we believe women can do. Yeah. Very cool. Well, I just wanted to point out, this is kind of a transition, but you in your book, you talk about these 7 virtues of a vitalist. And the book is not specific to childbearing year, but I couldn't help thinking about A, how much it can be applied to the childbearing year, and B, how much similarity there is between it and the way of the hearth mother that we teach
Mm.
around here. So I just want to remind people, if you do end up picking up this book, if you're pregnant or lactating postpartum mom, make sure you kind of are thinking about like, what does it mean to take these concepts and layer them over how you move through a pregnancy and a birth and a postpartum? Because I think there's a lot of really rich content there for that, as well as for life in general. Yeah.
I mean, I remember going through births that didn't match my vision with my emergency C-section and secondary infertility and, really wrestling with how much of this is mental. Like people just think you're a head case, like get out of your way, get out of your head. And it's really sad and hard to wrestle with and to blame yourself. That's never helpful. And one thing that someone said to me that really helped was it's a matter of nervous system function, not being a head case. You know what I mean? Like the nervous system. And if it's firing on all cylinders, then your body is fulfilling even its highest duties, with immune system and fertility and birth. Whereas if your nervous system is struggling and it's in overdrive and overwhelm, then some of those things fall to the side for survival.
Yep.
And so it's like getting into nervous system alignment and then taking care of those thoughts because they are so powerful. Like our belief systems shape what happens. And when we can embrace that as mothers, then we protect our belief systems, not only about our pregnancies and births, but about our children and their futures. And that's one of my desires with the book is that we can choose what we believe is true about our bodies and about our health and about our futures and pass that on to the next generation. And pregnancy is such a wild ride and an ability to choose, like, am I going to walk into this pregnancy just trying to avoid pain and avoid hard, or am I going to have a belief that God has given me the opportunity to co-create with him and that everything that's happening is happening for a reason and that it is good, And so it's just those little junctures, those little forks in the road are powerful. And I want to pass that on to other moms and give you the permission to pass it on to others too, because the more we talk about these things together, the more we can normalize them as a community, because that's really where health happens, is in our families and in community.
And this birth story is a perfect example of putting what you just talked about into motion. Even your whole litmus test you had about expecting it to go well. That's an example of the power of your thoughts to influence your nervous system, to then influence all the things. So yeah, thank you for helping us have this conversation and for facilitating it. And just here in this episode by sharing your story and your reflections on it, and also for writing about it so that it's accessible to be held in hands. And do you have any last minute final words that you'd like to share with our listeners and or a prayer that you'd like to pray over them?
Sure. I'll offer a prayer. Thank you, Father, for you are good and you are faithful and you have given us the gift of life, Lord. And I pray that you would just anoint every mother who's listening and that you would speak to her and show her who she is in your eyes and show her what is true about herself and about her children and help her to really know and understand the power of prayer, Lord, that as we walk forward, that you are always listening and that we can depend upon your voice any minute of any day. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.